So we are live with John Bello from District Sports Consulting in episode 14. We are live on YouTube right now. So we'll give it a couple of minutes, let people take their seats, get their
Cool.
popcorn.
Wonderful.
We are live. John Bello from District Sports Consulting, episode 14. We are live on
Just let me know when I got to talk, man.
do it. Take their seats, get
Cool.
their popcorn.
Wonderful.
All right, we got one person in. Let's go ahead and get into the meat. Right.
Perfect.
Episode 14. John, introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's John Bello, formerly from Florida, but I mean, moved up to DC about 2010, actually. 2010, 2011 is when I moved to DC and kind of started working in a non-soccer industry sport first. But I've been a coach for about 8 years now, going on 8, 9 years. Started my first coaching gig was out at Calverton Youth Soccer Elite, actually, out in Calvert County, and then transitioned to DC United, and that's pretty much where I spent the majority of my coaching career up until when I started District Sports Consulting. So yeah, that's a little bit brief history about me. Yeah.
We can take a deeper dive over the course of this episode. I'm Matthew from District Reign FC. This is ReignTalks, episode 14. Welcome. Thank you for coming on to the show today. Let's back up. You said you're originally from Florida. How did you or why did you make the trip up the coast?
Two reasons. One, my wife, who I wasn't married to, obviously at the time, I was pursuing. I had a little bit of a sparkle in my eye, right? I had a friend actually who started a insurance agency for State Farm up in Bethesda, Maryland, and so I was recruited by him to come up and actually open that with him together. And I think he's almost been in business now 10 years. So we were there at the very beginning, man. So it was a nice way to come up. I never lived in a big city before, so it was an interesting move to make, but I've enjoyed it so far for sure.
Yeah. And then how did you go from insurance to coaching?
Insurance was like it wasn't, I think, something that I thought I wanted to do long term. Very useful skills that I learned in that industry, obviously, but coaching had been something that was in the back of my mind since I finished playing in college. I hadn't ever really taken the time to dive into it or link up with a team and sort of, scratch that itch, so to speak. So I started little by little. As I was transitioning out of insurance, I was starting more and more to get into the soccer stuff. And my biggest link at the time was actually Nolan Sheldon who's now the assistant coach for the first team at DC United.
Yeah.
He had grown up at IMG Academies in Florida. He played there as a residential student growing up. And so he was older than me. I knew who he was. So I had reached out to him originally. And that was kind of like the first taste. I started to transition and just help out when he was with camps and stuff like that way back when. I used to just come out and help and observe and watch and volunteer my time. So that's kind of how I started making transition. I loved it. So I try to make a full go at it then.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like that's the way a lot of coaches get started is it's being there and putting that time in and kind of absorbing everything that's going on around you from, the more senior players or the senior coaches on the staff.
Yeah, it's it's not like a traditional, I guess, industry job, like being an attorney where you would go to school for 3 years, get an internship at a law firm, and then start your career. Soccer is like, there's no schooling for it. There's no formal education for it. You just kind of like decide one day, I'm going to be a coach, and you sort of weave your own path and find your way through your mutual connections or things that people that you meet. So it's kind of, my road was much of the same as probably everybody else's in a lot of ways.
Yeah. There is a lot of like coaching degrees in colleges now. How do you feel like that kind of changes coaches' trajectory? when they come
Oh,
up?
I wish they had that when I was coming up. Just something that I could, even if it was like a master in coaching, not necessarily specific, like soccer specific, even if it
Hmm.
was just like the fundamentals of coaching and the core
Yeah,
things that you needed to understand, that would have given me such a leg up. I feel like coming into the coaching world now.
right.
So now that those things are available, I think it's awesome that people have the opportunity to take those. And I think a lot of them are probably virtual too. Like
Yeah,
you don't even have to be there present. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
tons of opportunities for sure.
yeah. Definitely now during the COVID age. I know a lot of the USF coaching licenses are moving online, which I think has expanded a lot of opportunities for a lot of people because they're not, maybe not able to do those licenses in person.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Those can be a challenge to attend for sure.
yeah. So where did you go from Calverton? You've made connections, you've built kind of a rep, and then where did you go from there?
Yeah. So at the time, DC, like I said, I had reached out to Nolan. The guys at Calverton were great to give me a chance. I think it was Shane Williams and Damon Williams were the two guys out there. They run a club called like Calvert Elite, and I was working underneath those guys, and they really were great to bring me in. From there, I started doing a lot of volunteering with DC United, and literally I just volunteered for probably 3, 4, 5 months. My time on the weekends, and I would just be there. And then I started to get more and more responsibility kind of given to me from Nolan through the camp system. And that's kind of how I got really involved with DC United and started transitioning from Calverton to there. At the end of the first summer that I worked with DC United, I think the timing was really good for me. I had and that's part of this whole thing too, is just being in the right place at the right time and
Yeah.
making those and doing good work or just showing up, and trying your best. And Sonny Saloy was the director at the time of DC United Academy. I think the U13 coach, I don't know what had happened there, but there was a position available.
Hmm.
And at the end of the summer, and they approached me because that was called pre-academy at the beginning. It
Okay.
wasn't developmental academy, so there wasn't any licensing requirement. And I was like really new into coaching, so I was at like the very bottom of the coaching education
Hmm.
pyramid. I didn't get any waivers from playing college soccer to go like into my license, so I started at the bottom.
Yeah.
So I went right in, and yeah, they were awesome. Sonny gave me an opportunity. They helped guide me through that first year. Man, it was crazy, but it was, I basically went from being an assistant coach on a U12, U13 girls team to being in charge of like the U13 boys at DC United Academy almost right away. But I think their guidance really helped with that transition to really help
Hmm.
me take the right foot forward.
Yeah. That's a pretty intense transition
It
going
was.
from like 11, 12-year-old girls. They're fantastic. The whole age group. The 13-year-old boys. I was a 13-year-old boy once. It's terrible.
Yeah. And
Such
it's
a
funny
tough
because
age group.
those guys now are all, they were 2000s. So they're all
Yeah.
21 or 20 years old now.
Yeah.
Well, not 20 years old, 19, 20 years old in college. And it's so cool to see them older. But man, yeah, that first session, I remember walking out just like my heart was beating a million
Yeah.
miles a minute. And, you just wanted to put on a good session and get through it. So, yeah, it was definitely an intense transition. But I mean, that was one of the fastest ways I feel like to learn. I was blessed in
Mhm.
a lot of ways by being thrown into that. Like I said, they gave me good guidance, but at the same time, it was up to me to step outside my comfort zone pretty much
Yeah.
every single day and show up.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something we talk about with players a lot is being vulnerable enough to develop. And I think sometimes we miss that on the coaching side because we also have to be vulnerable, especially in those uncomfortable situations where everything is brand new.
Big time. We talk about that. I had a conversation with the coach today about this, where it's just if you think about like where you are in coaching, a lot of times you focus on a certain aspect. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So let's say, for example, I want to work on my annual planning, like how I map out the year and like the execution of my cycles. You know what I mean? Like 2 week
Mhm.
cycles or whatever. I spend a lot of time and focus on that, right? But because I focus so much there, sometimes other things go to the
Mhm.
wayside. And usually
Yeah.
those things that go to the side are the things that I'm probably the least comfortable with. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah.
And it could be like, I don't know, like coaching animation and like getting out of my comfort zone because believe it or not, I probably sound like I'm shouting to you, but I promise I'm trying not to. When I first started coaching, I was so quiet. Like
Mhm.
I would like whisper to kids like
Yeah.
coaching points.
Yeah.
And, at DC United, if anybody's ever been to that training facility, we don't have lights. So we had generator lights, right?
Mhm.
And those things were loud, man.
Yeah.
So like when it got time to that part of the year where we had to use those, there was no way getting around being quiet. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
That's some great learning experiences there, but for sure, I think coaches oftentimes will focus on kind of what comes easy to them and not what's
Mhm.
uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
if you're not in a situation or like a setting where you're getting consistent feedback or criticism, like constructive criticism,
Mhm.
you won't ever like go after that and try to improve it a lot of times.
Yeah. I think it's a very human quality. Um, in terms of, you mentioned structured feedback, how would you go about kind of getting that as a coach?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was really lucky and fortunate, and this is something that ever since I've gotten out of DC United, I've really come to find out by just talking to coaches locally about challenges that they experience. I mean,
Mhm.
we were a smaller staff. We had, I think, 7 teams. I mean, we had like almost, if not weekly coaches meetings, every other day we were getting together to discuss a topic, or I could pull a coach from whatever he was doing and discuss my
Mhm.
session or whatever it was. Or I could ask a coach to like stay after his session if I was after his and just give me feedback for the first 20 minutes or the first segment of my session. So
Right.
I think that small environment was really beneficial for me, especially as a younger coach. There's a lot of older coaches in the time that were in there that I could speak to.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, and plus the experience of those guys was incredible because like Sonny was, Ajax legend. Tom
Yeah.
Torres, he's at, he's in the women's program now. He was an unbelievable resource. Nolan, all these guys that were there. I mean, it was great to pick their brains as much as you could and just listen to them. So I think for me, I was spoiled. And then you can see the challenges now. If I look at like a big local club and they have 70 staff coaches, it's
Yeah.
totally a different environment, a little bit more challenging. You might feel like you're on an island a little bit. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you had a really, really kind of planet aligning situation in terms of being able to make that happen. Because you guys are all in one place. But then I was going to ask about the other end of the spectrum, the massive clubs that have a really large coaching staff, and the other ones that have maybe a similar size coaching staff to you, but they're spread out, right? So
Mm.
think of more grassroots level. I'm meeting on one day a week, and the other coach is meeting on another day a week.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, to gain the critical feedback you need, like especially if it's on field, like the interaction with the players that you really want somebody to like observe and do that. You got to remember that's like extra time or somebody going out of their way to do that for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you have somebody in your network who could be a close mentor like that or a work colleague, and you guys are both willing to make the investment for each other to
Mhm.
stay extra or come early or whatever it is, I think that's the best way probably to set that up.
Mhm.
It's a lot. It's probably, I don't know because I've never been in that environment, but I would assume it's very difficult for the leadership at those bigger clubs to organize how to make that all work consistently. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every now and then, I'm sure a lot of the clubs will do coaching evaluations or
Mhm.
observations of their coaching staff to try to give some feedback. But like the ones that are like less planned, the ones that are sort of just
Mhm.
pop up or those
Yeah.
informal ones, I always feel like those ones have so much value. So
Yeah.
any way you can stimulate that, the better.
Mhm. Would you recommend videotaping sessions and doing
Uh,
some of your own analysis, or sending it to another coach to get some feedback as well?
Definitely. I think I don't know. One of the best things I think you could do if you tape it is to use like if you have an iPhone, just use your iPhone and you
Yep.
could you could pin your this with thing to your shirt collar. Seriously, I've done this all the time. And you just do a voice memo, right?
Uh-huh.
And you record a voice memo and then you just link it up in an iMovie or whatever software you have with the video. And
Wow.
then you have complete clarity on everything that I'm saying. Plus you can see the whole picture of everything that's going on. So
Right.
it's kind of like that's the way I would do it. And anytime I wanted to like film a session for my coaching ed courses, we didn't,
Mhm.
down the road, DC United, we had like microphones and stuff like that. So at the very beginning, though, we didn't have that stuff. We
Yeah,
were
I
we were
remember like
operating
the
brother with
single,
like
like, yeah.
with the iPad, man. So it was this was a great way for us to do it. Once we figured out how, it was awesome. And
Yeah.
that's so critical because everything that you say is captured. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Not just the coaching points. Like the side talk on the side, if there's a player there, like this small interaction, or if a coach comes over and you speak, they give you some feedback and you guys have a back and forth. Like there's things that go on in the session outside of just like your freeze moment or whatever coaching point that you go and intervene in, that is really important for you to reflect on and review. So I think that was like the crucial part of that. So I think it's a great tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really insightful too. That's a really good tip about the voice memo.
Definitely.
That's awesome. So we've kind of touched on what you've done with DC United. How did you transition from the U13s? And do you have any tips for coaches that are making transitions?
Good question.
Between age groups or genders or anything like that?
Yeah. So I went from the 13s to the 14s to the 15s at the academy. And really the 14s were the 15s and the 13s were the 14s because of like they did the whole like age group chart shift or whatever. So I spent, 4 years or 5 years working with those age categories, and I didn't really move up. You know what I mean? I would assist with older age groups because I told them that I asked the club, like that was a priority for me to be exposed, to be around older players more often, build relationships with them, figure out, how you interact with those guys. Cause I was so used to one age category. That the U13, U14 age category, that these kids are in like out eighth grade, going into ninth grade, usually. Some are in ninth grade already. And it's an incredibly challenging year if you think about it, because you have guys, let's say you have like the younger end of the spectrum, they're still in eighth grade, right? They're sort of in that, the oldest kid in middle school. Then you have the guys who are going into high school, the youngest ones in high school. They have new social interactions and new social influences. Man, these kids they were growing so much mentally, physically, emotionally, all within 1 year. Like the kid I would have in August was totally different from the kid in like June the next year, a lot of times. So that experience really helped me. I just feel like learn how to adapt as it went, if that makes sense. Like maybe how I talked and interacted with the player might be different in August from when we got to the end of the year, because one, our relationship would grow, and two, he might, like, personal things that he believes in may change, or how he interacts with his friends or whatever. It all could change. So it just that really helped me kind of learn how to pivot in the middle of a season, if that makes sense. Like, this isn't working with this kid anymore, so I need to try something different to engage him. And that really helped me, I feel like, kind of when I would go to the older age categories, and even if I had to like lead sessions, I think that was something that that would help me just like kind of figure that out a little bit quicker than if I had just coached U12 my whole life and then went to coach U17 for a week and been like, well, what do I do here, right? I'll tell you an interesting story, though, maybe that helps give some perspective on this one, though, because it's kind of refers to like the way in which I treated, like not treated players, but set the performance environment for the different age groups, right? So there was some consistency for me. So I was asked to coach the U17 team for like a week because one of the coach of the team was away doing like a course. And I coached the 17s in a session, and then I coached my U13 team directly after that. And the academy director was out there watching both sessions, right? And so I was under some pressure, I guess, right? The older guys, I approached it like in a way that was really no nonsense, if that makes sense. I was like, all right, guys, we're on task today. You got a minute for water breaks. Boom. I kept the flow of the session really fast. I wanted them to like feel like they were working and really getting something out of the session, right? And I just didn't give them any room to misbehave, and if there was any misbehavior, I would correct it right away, right? My second session started, and it was like all of a sudden I took my tempo and my intensity from like way up to way down. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden I treated the U13 players totally differently. I was like wasn't controlling where the balls were. When I said water break, kids would be juggling and I wouldn't say anything to them. Like, it was great. I treated them completely different than I treated the older age group. So after the session, the director comes up to me and he's like, why did you treat these guys differently than these guys? If you want the performance environment to be exactly the same, why not hold them all to the high standard? You're basically the standard like bearer. You know what I mean? And so with that, I started to realize, well, it doesn't matter then what age group that I coach. As long as I go into the session with like, this is what the standards are. These are what like the behavioral requirements are. This is what I expect from you guys. This is how we're going to interact, right? and this is how we're going to communicate, and what I want to hear out of you guys along the way. It really, it's not that much different in a lot of ways. You know what I'm saying? And I think for me at DC United, definitely spoiled though, because these are really motivated players. You know what I mean? It could be different at different local clubs, right? But I thought from transitioning from like a younger age group to an older age group, I think having that mentality now has allowed me, if I do a camp and it's all like U17 players, I have no problem. You know what I mean? I just set the standards. This is what we're going to accomplish. This is how I want you guys to communicate with me, so that there's an interaction and we go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I think consistency is really important, especially when they're staying in the same club, so that when they are 17, they know how to act and what's expected of them. Um, I think we can get caught on the fundamental differences of like a 14-year-old versus a 17 or 18-year-old, because they act differently, you know. Like there's a different level of goofiness and there's a different level of engagement that you can get. But if you set the expectation, then they're going to strive to hit that.
Definitely. And there's always room for that though. You know what I mean? Like you go into you're coaching 13s and 17s, the characteristics of those players, just like you said, are different. You know what I mean? There are different points in their life. And the way in which I behave to like get the most out of them could be slightly different. You know what I mean? Right. So you got to just kind of keep that in mind and remember that, right? A 13-year-old may be like more, let's say, eager to please the coach. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
They want the approval of the adult in the group, right? You're the pack leader. They want that approval that you're doing a good job. You know what I mean? Whereas an older player is more rebellious, maybe. Maybe they don't need it as much from you, but they definitely want to show their peers that they're like they're the best. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So totally different, right? So kind of then how you go into those sessions, the way you set it up might not be different, but the way you communicate with them definitely could be in your like animation, the way you control or the way you say certain things could definitely change for sure.
Yeah. I think right now we're talking about one of the most important parts of coaching, and that's those relationships and that man management. It's not the X's and O's or who goes here when, the technical part. It's how are we interacting, and is that getting you to where we both want to go? And I think a lot of that gets lost sometimes when we're trying to get a specific technique pulled out of a player, right? So I think it's important to remember, how we're conveying that too.
Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah. The interaction piece that you just said, that's one of the most important things though. I think it's, I'm sure a lot of players have been in experiences when they've been on a team where it's like anything that the coach says is like the end all be all. You know what I mean? And they hold on to that, and no one disagrees with what's said by the pack leader. You know what I mean? Right. It's just sort of like everybody just nods their head and they're like, all right, let's do it. I mean, so I think the more and more you can get the guys, like you were just saying, to get them to interact with you and set that environment up and let them know that that's okay and safe and expected in a lot of ways, I think that's huge.
Yeah, definitely. Let's move into your current project right now. Kind of moved out of DC United and then into District Sports Consulting. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, DSC, man. It's been, over 2 years since the project started, like going into my third year now with it. It was a scary transition, man. Like I tell people that all the time. It was how it came about. Maybe I'll start there just to kind of give you some insight into that one. So my last year coaching at United was a really challenging year with my schedule. And I had not my schedule personally, but our training schedule. Right. And so basically we had a big gap, a 72-hour gap in the middle of the training week where I didn't see the players. So I would only get to see them once at the very beginning and then twice at the tail end of the week. Right. And the second session of the week was the session that I had a full pitch, and it was like the late session on a Thursday night. Right. Yeah. So it was like, from Monday when we got done at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. all the way till 7:30 p.m. on Thursday, I didn't see him. So I was really trying to find a way to close the gap of like the learning curve and speed up the learning process when they would actually get into the training session as much as I could. Right. So I started to think about like ways I could use or integrate technology into things that I was doing to like really help promote that. So the easiest way was video, and we recorded all the games, and I could pull clips or do things and either paint them or send them to the players. Or a lot of times what I would do is I would use it as they would come to the session early. We would watch the film, the clips that we were going to train that were related either from the game before or upcoming game, whatever the target was or what we were doing. And then we would go train it. And like what I saw was just like the process of learning from the players, like of what to do in the certain situations, just exponentially increased like how fast they pick things up, So it was a great learning tool. And then just through driving questions back and forth with the players, I started to think like, man, there's so much value in the interaction about the film and discussing it that I got to just use it as much as I could. Right. So from there, I actually had a player from a different club reach out to me and had asked me if I could do film review with his kid. Right. And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? I'll give it a shot. Right. So I found so much value actually in spending time with that player doing individual film review that I was like, man, I got to try to build this into my schedule at DC United. Right. And the problem was it was impossible and I couldn't do it. You know what I mean? They're just logistically, it would never make sense. The classroom space everybody was going in and out of it. There's no quiet space to work. It was really hard. So, but there was something there from those meetings that I had with this kid or this player. And then there was another player that I ended up, so that first semester was like 2 guys that I was working with while I was coaching. So it was like kind of like my side hustle, These guys, I'd learned so much from interacting with them. And I was like, okay, there's something here. You know what I mean? So I started just doing some research locally around clubs, what everybody was doing. And it just seemed that there was a big lack of use for film. And a lot of that could just be because of lack of facilities or whatever the case was, right? But players were really hungry for an additional resource or an additional way to train to get better and get ahead. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
So once I started like talking to families and stuff about this, the idea kind of really took off. So the idea with District Sports Consulting originally was that, all right, if I think about the player in the middle and all the different ways around him that you can influence individual player development, film analysis is just one of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be nutrition, it could be sports psychology, it could be public speaking, it could be academics, it could be, you name it, the well-rounded holistic development of an athlete. I was like, why not brand a company where down the road, what I want to do is bring on industry leaders or guys into the project that can offer different services to help support these for players if they're at like a club that doesn't have it. You know what I mean? Why not? But primarily when I got into things, it really started to just end up being the focus was a lot on 2 things: game analysis, mentorship, and like talking to players a lot about some of their challenges and things like that. And then pairing what we saw in the film actually with on-field training, right? And that was a big deal because I was bridging this gap between, I don't view myself as like an individual technical trainer, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do that type of work for sure, but I really try to link everything to either position specific work, or if I have film of the player, link it to the behaviors that we want to correct from what we see in the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for me, that was just creating a stronger link and supplementing his or the player's development faster than what it would be if I was just going out there and teaching them, technical things, right? So, that's kind of where it's ended up becoming, or where it's kind of stuck around to. And then I've just tried to, more recently branch out into a few different other areas like coaching education. I started the podcast. That was another thing, to be a coaching resource for coaches. So, and that's kind of where it's at right now, but that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's really cool how organically some of these things come into our lives, that we're like, oh, this really makes sense, or let's develop this a little further. I wonder how many times that happens that we're not aware of it. Like these brilliant ideas, and they just keep on going. But the one that sticks with us, and we really develop that into something special, I think that's really important.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. Like if I think about this, right, I was on a really good trajectory with coaching, with like team coaching.
Yeah.
And so like right before I had announced, right after I was about to like announce that I was leaving DC United full time, because like none of the families knew, or not like, only the staff and like the leadership knew, right? And I get this text and it was like, okay, I was voted by US Soccer to be one of the top 3 U15 coaches in the whole country, right?
Wow.
And I was like the East Coast top
Yeah.
U15 head coach in the DA or something like that.
That's
And I
awesome.
was like, okay, my phone was blowing up, and I was like, this is crazy, you know, what a cool award, you know what I mean? And it was just really nice to be recognized for something that I had no
Yeah.
idea was even going on, right? But then if you think about it, I had already made the decision in my mind that I was going to leave coaching and that
Right.
I was going to go start my own company. And
Yeah.
like, you know, that devil, that little guy on your shoulder, he was like, don't do it, don't do it. I mean, that was there, man.
Yeah.
It was there, and it was real. And you're right, it was the leap of faith to take something of an idea of an area that I really wanted to learn more about. I think was a really hard decision to make,
Yeah.
but I'm so happy that I made it, because there's been a lot of different changes that have happened in my life because of the choice that I made. So you're right. I think if I hadn't really taken that leap and just accepted that this could be a really good pathway for me, I think, I don't know, maybe, I don't know where I would have gone or where I would be, you know what I mean? But no, I chose the path of what I would call real uncertainty because, you know what I mean? When I decided to go, I think I only had like 2 clients. So I was like trying to figure out, how do I build this thing?
Yeah.
But I was lucky, man. I have the total support of so many people in the community, just from the years of work that I've done with the players in the academy. So
Mhm.
without them, I would be nothing, basically. They're awesome. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Definitely important to lay the groundwork um, in the build up.
definitely. 100%. Yeah. I was trying to be calculated about it, but it was, at some point, there's no calculation, man.
Right.
You just got to go. So,
Yeah.
um, no,
Yeah.
I think the transition to the company has been great. I just dove in, to be honest with you, and I
Mhm.
started with trying to just commit to saying, all right, well, I like to learn a lot through teaching. So how, just like coaching. So what can
Mhm.
I do with like the video stuff, and how can I keep adapting it to just get the most out of every interaction that I'm working with the player, and what can I keep learning from it? So, I mean, I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sessions since I started this thing, and
Mhm.
spent so many practical hours studying game film, just things that I probably never would have done in my current coaching situation had I just continued what I was doing. So from the benefit from that's been incredibly massive for me to be able
Yeah.
to dedicate that time, and then now be able to just discuss like tactics and analysis at such a higher level than I
Mhm.
could before when I was still coaching 3 years ago, you know?
Right. So one kind of specific question I have is about the timing, right? So when you were doing it with the full team, and then when you do it with an individual, what kind of timing are you looking at in terms of, we're gonna watch and analyze this match, and then we'll go apply it, directly after that? Or do you take a week to look at it, and then maybe the next week you get to it? What sort of timing
Mm.
have you found works best?
It all depends on your situation and kind of things that you have access to be honest with you. It's a
Mm.
hard question to answer. In an ideal world, you would probably be doing a small film session every single day.
Mhm.
You know, you would be reviewing some aspect, either from, I would say, like in the first 2 days of the week, you might be looking at things that you want to correct from the previous weekend. You know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
there's an element in a perfect world that you could build into the training sessions that is corrective exercises, you know?
Right.
Because we have to learn from our failures and our mistakes for sure, right?
Definitely.
And the challenge with like individual like youth coaching is that you're not necessarily based on like game to game, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Where, because a lot of times, I would say, like under the age of U15, you're not, it's not the focus, right? Winning is not necessarily the focus
It
yet.
shouldn't be. Yeah.
It shouldn't be. A lot of people would disagree with that, right? But you know, it's the process and it's the learning process. So as I plan out topics that'll go throughout all the different weeks, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's just it's hard to like go like uh, if I plan some things, I want to stay on task, right? Then, and I want to get these learning objectives out there to the team. Then it's hard to just say like, if we had a really bad game, I'm going to take the next 3 days to like go over all this stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe I just take a session, one of those 3 sessions, then and adapt and fix it and then move on, right? But to answer your question, I would say um, what's hard about film sessions, I would say, is the link between what the corrective behaviors are, what the actions are on the field, right? So
Mhm.
timing wise, before training is awesome. You know what I mean? If you can get them in some kind of way watching film, whether it's in a room or whether you pre-record something through like using Zoom and draw on it, and it's a 2-minute clip and you send it to them. This is kind of what the key thing we're working on in the training session today. That'll help speed up the learning process, right?
Yeah.
If there are certain, for individual players or small groups of like functional groups of players, let's say like defenders, if you have a game on the weekend and you guys don't have time to go through the corrective stuff and send it to them at the beginning of the week so the game is fresh in their mind, then you show them the things as early as you can so that it's still there and they can make the connection, because if you go too long, the players just will forget, right?
Right.
Let's be honest, you know what I mean? They won't remember. So I don't remember what I did yesterday in a lot of ways. So I think that's the timing of it. If you could do before training, it would be amazing. And then obviously if you can do something before a game too, unbelievable, just as a refresher of like what the objectives are for the day. You know what I mean?
Right. I think that kind of puts us into the next point that I wanted to talk about is, so you talk about the objectives for the session. How often do you share the full session with the team, like in terms of layout, in terms of actual instruction, maybe videos connected to those?
Often, I would say, to be honest with you. I want them to be as involved with like the training process as they possibly can. You know what I'm saying? Without their, like, if you think about it, if you created some elaborate exercise that you've never run with the team before, and the first time you're going to explain it to them is on the field, like in the moment when you got a 20-minute segment and you fumble around the instructions for 6 minutes, you've wasted 6 of the 20. You know what I mean?
Right.
So sharing things with them beforehand helps you be as efficient as possible when you get on the field, to be honest with you. So maybe it's not the full session. Maybe it's like, hey guys, this is what the progression of the session will be today. We'll start here, we'll go here, we'll go here, and boom. Or you send them the key exercise for the day. You know, part 3 of the training session today is going to be this exercise. Right. And you could even list out like the colors of the teams. You know what I mean? Like, you know, Matthew, you're on team blue, these guys here. So that when you get to it, you can be like, all right, guys, go to your pennies or whatever. They can, anything that helps speed up, decrease the amount of time it takes to get the organization correct, I would say would really be helpful. But I used to share with the last team I coached, I would share how I organized the training weeks with them. So I would show them like the structure of the session Monday, Thursday, and Friday. And I think they were really surprised by like how it was laid out, because they probably just never, when I was a player, I would never consider the actual thought and planning that goes into a training session. You know what I mean? I just thought they like came out and threw codes out and we did stuff. So sharing that with them though, actually sparked a ton of dialogue, to be honest with you, because they started to ask questions, right? And from there, like, let's say one great example, Jacob Green, actually, who plays at Loudoun, you know, he started like a bunch of games this year already. I had a conversation with him on one of the days, the Thursday where we had the full pitch. I was doing a lot of like smaller segmented tactical exercises, like 6v6 or something like that. And I asked him about it and I was like, what do you think about these exercises? And his response was, well, I really, you know, me and some of the other guys, we really like learning an 11v11 setting because it makes more sense to us to make the connections between like the partnerships that we have between players around us when they're in their positions, right? We'll understand the behavior better. And I was like, oh, so then I just adapted that segment of like that week because it made more sense for the guys that I was working with. But had I not shown them that like schematic of how I outlaid the week, we probably never would have had the conversation.
Yeah. I think it's one of the big like myths in coaching is that, you know, it's my playbook, it's my session planner, I'm never going to share it with the players. But recognizing that a lot of players in this generation are visual learners, and we can stand out on the field and we can scream at them as much as we want, and they're not going to get it as efficiently as if they had seen it, you know, on the way to the field.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of guys who they learn way differently from each other in some ways, right? But like, if you think about it, it's more about like the subject matter of what you're teaching. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm terrible at golf, and I've tried to learn golf so much by just watching YouTube videos, and it's poisonous for my brain, right? And I go out there and I'm shanking balls right and shaking balls left, and all I need to do is go get a lesson. That's it. Like I need in-person instruction, right? So that way of learning, like visual doesn't make sense for me. I need to feel it. I need to experience it. And soccer in a lot of ways for a lot of players is like that. They can't, the tactical board and the videos is great, but they want to get in, they want to be able to make the choices on their own and make the mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And it makes total sense. You know what I mean? So it's a combination of everything.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's kind of up to the coach to, be aware of what learning styles are on the team. Like maybe just taking a quick survey, and then it also brings them together a little bit in some sort of like team building capacity. Because I know how I learn. Now I'm going to talk to you about how you learn, and then now we can learn together, and that improves the chemistry when we're playing.
Definitely. Yeah, I think so, man. I think you hit it there. It's an important point.
And I think it's what you kind of started almost 3 years ago is really ahead of its time. So how much adaptation have you made to, the current situation in the country?
So a lot, I would say. When I originally started, I mean, I was always meeting players in person, coffee shops, their home, like a car, you name it, wherever I could, wherever I like needed to get, the parent was there, though, you know what I mean? Like whatever I was like, whenever I was like, whenever I was trying to like just get involved with them, like I wanted them in person. The reason why was I wanted the interaction. I didn't want a player to be able to hide from the conversation at all, right? When you're one-on-one, there is no hiding. It's not like you're coach at the front of the classroom and you ask somebody to come to the board and no one raises their hand. You just kind of pick somebody. This is not the case. You know what I mean? So it was funny. When I first started doing these things, I was really heavily reliant on trying to get as much film together as I could. I'd like watch the full game, try to get as much information as I could and bring it all to the session. And what I realized was it was completely wrong in a lot of ways because it limited the amount, like the player, it was too much information, number one. Number two was like the players were overwhelmed. And so a lot of times it was like, this is just too much. They weren't interactive as much because I was trying to speed to get through the content. You know what I mean? So what I ended up doing then was just shifting a lot of the focus and really simplifying everything that I did to try to make it more about them and more about their thought process and more about their mind. Right. So, when COVID happened, it was really interesting because, well, let me backtrack. One of the things that I've done with the players to really try to bring and draw things out is provide almost like a script that we go through each like interaction. You know what I mean? So one, it gives them a level of expectation about what they're gonna like, what they can expect. I do the same thing with them. I'm like, here's the plan for the day. These are the questions we're gonna go through. These are the types of clips we're looking at, so they know what to expect. And then we watch them, but like it's all me just driving question after question after question and getting them to go like a layer deeper and a layer deeper and a layer deeper, right? And sometimes now, I mean, I might look at 2 clips the entire session with the player, and that's all we discuss because there's so much information that we can take out from that one clip, right? So I would say the biggest challenge that I have is actually choosing the clips for the sessions because I want to make it in line with what the kid is really motivated to learn about. I want to make it in line with the objectives of their club. I never want to go into a film session and be like, you should be doing this when their coach is telling them to do this. So there's a huge part of discovery that I need to find out from the players about, how their team plays, what their positional roles and responsibilities are, things like that, so that I can always try to be in line with that. You know what I'm saying? I never want to be against it. So, those were some big challenges that I saw that I overcame in the beginning. And then, when COVID came through and happened, I was really worried, man. I was like, I don't know if this thing's going any further. So it was almost like a moment where of sheer panic followed by some like real clarity of what I needed to do. Right. So what happened was I decided that, okay, much like what I did with players when I was coaching them to try to make a bunch of little coaches on the field, why not take the same process that I learned how to analyze film and just teach that to players in a much more simplified way so that down the road, they actually don't need me anymore. You know what I mean? Which sounds crazy from like a business model perspective, right? But it was the one, I thought it was the important and the right thing to do because, there wasn't any real film of the players anymore. It was all like, we could only really study players at their position at the pro or semi-pro or college level. So why not just teach them that process as best I can, right? Adapt and like refine that process over the course of the last 6 months. And then now you can use that in combination like with their games when they start to get them back, right?
Right.
So one of the things that I've done with guys is I've moved from being a film session where I bring the content and the questions to where I give them the questions and the content before the session even starts. We
Hmm.
call it a flipped classroom essentially, right? Where they're bringing all the information and they actually lead and guide the discussion, right? It's very tech heavy, obviously, and the players got to be really in tune with it, and there's an educational process that goes along with it. But if I've worked with a player long enough, they should be able to do this, right? And those sessions are fascinating, man, because they go by so fast. The kids come in, they're really they have their answers there, they want them to be correct. And what you find out though is that players are very you have to really draw their attention to the details in sessions, right? Because all they see a lot of times is the general picture. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if they're in the film, they only see them in a lot of ways. So it's like this process of teaching them. Like when we learn how to develop training sessions, we start from the big picture and work our way backwards, right?
Mhm.
This I try to teach them the same process. It's like look at the big picture first. Let's say this structure versus this structure, right? Now, if we know you guys are 4-4-2 and these guys are 4-3-3, how does it fit in, right? And then
Yeah.
based on your position, what might be some of the things we could predict could happen, based off of like kind of what's happening. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Structure versus structure and strategy versus strategy, right? Once we have that foundation, I mean, we can go forever on like this clip or this clip or this clip, right? And analyze behaviors. So I think that process for the guys has been awesome. And also, I guess the last part is just that everything's moved virtually,
Yeah.
which was something that I really wanted to do, but didn't know how to get that done. So this forced us to do it. And a lot of players actually through their feedback they prefer it in a lot of ways, to be honest with
Mhm.
you, because they're in charge of their screen. They can annotate and draw on their side. So it's a
Right.
great tool for coaches to use, to be honest with you. And it's free, man. Zoom is
Yeah.
awesome. I don't know why everybody should be on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Skype had like 20 years to get it together, and when we needed them,
No.
Zoom Zoom put it together.
Zoom just came in, man. They came through.
Yeah.
No, it was great. So no, but it's been a wild development over time. I've learned
Mhm.
so much from these meetings that I think if I were to go back into a team environment and be either a head coach or an assistant coach in some capacity, I
Mhm.
mean, I think I could really use this as a tool to like, I don't know, to really help focus on like the individual development of players or like the small functional groups development. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it
Yeah.
would be a really useful tool. So
Definitely. Definitely. I think teaching them the skill and giving them ownership creates this kind of accountability on their own development,
mhm.
right? Because if I'm owning my development, then I'm really gonna grow.
Huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it can't be, that's the thing. It's like there's a lot of, I wouldn't say there's a lot of blame placed on coaches, right? But there is it is like, you know, uh, coaches are just under it, man. Like, I
Mhm.
get it. You know what I mean? It's different in our country than other countries from what I've seen. And unless you're at like a pro academy, the reality is that like you might have a full time job and coach a team, at night and you're grinding, man. Like,
Yeah.
it's so hard. And I get it, man. So I think the quicker the players can understand that it's their future, their development. And if you think about the amount of time I spend with a player, like
Mhm.
3 sessions in one semester might be, I don't know what that is. If it's an hour and a half each session, you do the math, whatever many hours that is, it might
Yeah.
only be in one full semester. It might only be the equivalent of like 8 total days with a player.
Right.
Now that's bad math, but you know what I mean? Like,
I'm not gonna call you on it.
but it could be like, think about that, like 180 some days or 180 days. And I only spent this much time with the players
Yeah.
and they're on their own for this massive
Yeah.
percentage of time. Well, what are you doing with your time? Why
Yeah.
is it my fault that you're not making the progress that you want to make right now? I'm there as the guide. I'm there to give the
Mhm.
tools. I'm there to help guide them along the way. And I make a huge
Yeah.
effort to do that. Right. But in a lot of ways, man, it's on the players. They have to make the
Yeah.
choices that they want to do. If they say they want to be great and they say they want to be really good at something, or they say they want to play D1, they 100% have to show the initiative.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the difference between like teaching and facilitating, right? I'm going to facilitate your growth. I can facilitate your development, but like you said, you're the one that has to live with you every day,
Mm.
You're the one that has to wake up and look at yourself in the mirror if you don't achieve what you said that you wanted to achieve, and you
Yeah,
have to live with that, right? I think
definitely.
that's a big shift for players, especially as they come up through the system. Especially going from 13 years old to 17 and 18 years old, changing that mindset is important.
Definitely. It's hard to get it right too, man. Like if you think about it,
Hmm.
these kids at a young age, all of them, you ask them what they want to do, and they'll all say play pro, play college, blah, 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 right?
Right.
And the reality is only a small percentage of them will. So
Hmm.
they might be really motivated at a young age, but there's a lot of things that got to fall into place, but their intrinsic motivation to get up
Hmm.
every day and do something or study or run or lift
Right.
or whatever. I mean, you think about how long they have to maintain that over time to achieve what they want to achieve. It's no easy feat,
Yeah.
man. So,
It's a daily struggle. I think
absolutely.
the dream sometimes outweighs the process.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
part of coach's job is to get them to fall in love with that process. Like while you're around me, fall in love with working hard because I'm not always going to be there. You have to lift yourself up. You have
Definitely.
to push yourself to do these things.
Yeah. I think that's we could go segue in a whole different way with that one, but it's that's a big one, man. I'm really passionate about that topic too because the way you talk to players and praise players is a big deal too. So
Hmm.
that ties into cultivating that mindset for sure.
Yeah, yeah. We might have to do a part two next month.
Definitely.
So we don't have any questions from the audience. Uh, so um, two things to kind of get us into a place to wrap it up. Um, Tell us where we can find your podcast and what's going on with that, and then tips for potential young coaches or coaches that are looking to make transitions.
Yeah. You can find the podcast on all like the major platforms. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcast. You can go to my website, districtsportsconsulting.com, and it's embedded in the website too. So you can listen there for free.
Mhm.
Tons of spots to go get it. So yeah, definitely check it out. That was a new passion project that I wanted to start at the beginning of the year. When COVID hit, everybody started a podcast, but I've been like trying to stay consistent with it. It's been tough, but it's been a wonderful experience. I think just figuring out how to tell a story and like how to connect. Like that's one of the bigger things I've done more recently. In the last episode that I just released today, actually, there's a survey in the episode description that I'm really trying to get coaches to input their challenges and things that they're experiencing in their club environments, and also what they
Mhm.
really want to learn, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that the more coaches I can connect with, I think this platform has allowed me to do that in a way where I'm not trying to gain anything from them. I just really want to learn. And
Yeah.
the coaches that have shared with me, man, have been awesome. Like they've been so cool to spend the time, 20, 30 minutes of their day
Hmm.
to share these challenges with me. And they're so different, right? So I think
Yeah.
the podcast has been an amazing tool, I think, to create just a platform where I think I can help bridge some gaps for some coaches or spark some new
Hmm.
ideas in coaches. And at the end of the day, my whole goal with it is even if 5 coaches listened and got something out of a couple of the episode, it was worth it because it's a huge growth thing for me. Uh,
Yeah.
Public speaking is I'm uncomfortable with in a lot of ways, and if you put yourself out there like that, it is you're open, you're up a criticism galore could come your way, right? It's just about having that mentality and mindset that you're gonna learn a lot of things, and you're gonna make a lot of mistakes, and
Hmm.
it's been a huge learning curve for me. But yeah, I think go check it out. It's and I'd love anybody's feedback. Is I'm wide open, man. I love that anybody who's calling me, they're like, "Hey, I got some feedback for you. Do you mind?" I'm like, "Let's go. Like, give it to me." So
That's awesome. The
definitely,
coach's mind.
yeah. The Coach's Mind with John Bello. If you look it up, you got to probably put John Bello in there. It's not going to show up high enough. You know what I mean? But the Coach's Mind with John Bello. Yeah.
That's awesome. And
Uh,
then
the second question. So
yeah.
about younger coaches transitioning. Um, whew, tough one too, because I would say just be coaching in a lot of ways is a really hard pathway as like a profession, to be honest with
Mhm.
you. It depends really kind of what your goals are and what you want to go, but you might not really know what those are until you get into it, right? So I think it's if you're a young coach kind of starting off, the biggest thing that I could say is just find a way to obtain a mentor as quickly as you can. And I know a lot of coaches probably ask where you can do that. And the easiest place is to look within your club
Mhm.
structure, your club environment. Find the guy find the girl, whoever it is, who is somebody who's doing really good work that you look up to and you respect. As intimidating as it might be to go up and ask for their time, I think you'll be
Yeah.
really surprised at the amount of time that people are willing to give to you. So,
Mhm.
a lot of people aren't looking to be mentors, but I think when it comes to you, I think it's always like, yeah, why not? Like I'd love to spend some time speaking with you about your project and what you're doing with your team and share notes about what I've done, because you can learn something from anybody. So that would be the first thing I would say is don't go on this on your own. It's
Mhm.
something that, like I said, there's no formal education in it. You're only going to learn through trial and error. But I guess you need a variation of perspectives in the beginning, because probably when you start coaching, what you'll do right away is mimic the behaviors of the coaches that you had when you were young,
Right.
right? If you were very fortunate to have a very good coach or something like that, then yes, you'll probably like just translate a lot of those behaviors that you saw to what
Mhm.
you do. A lot of guys might not have been so fortunate. So I think it's you have that as a base, as a foundation, right?
Yeah.
Plus your personality and who you want to be as a coach, right? And then I would say find somebody that you can look up to, or someone that you can share information frequently with. Every
Right.
2 weeks, sit down for 30 minutes and discuss something, whatever it is, just to get feedback. So, the second thing that I would say about young coaches is something that I probably didn't learn until 4 years or so, and like 3 or 4 years into my coaching, was about my personality and being
Mhm.
comfortable with who I was as a coach and owning
Right.
my authentic self in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And like I told you, I was really quiet in the beginning, and I felt uncomfortable. I had to raise my voice, and then I was like, should I always be like this? Do I always have to yell? And then came the whole thing of like guided questions and versus directives, and like you just got to figure out, like write down or find examples of guys that you, or girl, like female coaches that you look up to, that you think should provide really good examples. And like, do you like, I don't know, do you not conform to that, but do you gravitate towards
Mhm.
that? You know what I mean? And just
Yeah.
be like, well, maybe I am this type of coach, right?
Yeah.
Or I value it. So let me give you one example. If you're a young coach and you are like really quiet, really reserved, and you want to play this high pressing, in your face style of play, right? Like you want to be like New York Red Bull to like the 10th degree, but you don't know how to scream. Like you're not intense. You know what I mean? You have no
Mhm.
really strong animation. You're just very like quiet. You're on the sidelines. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you're not saying much, right? Your personality essentially isn't matching up then with kind of your idea of soccer in a lot
Mhm.
of ways, right? So that's what I mean by like take the time to write down and kind of just figure out who you are as a coach and own that. Be comfortable with that, and you
Yeah.
don't need to conform to like if you go to this club and everybody's a screamer, you don't need to be a screamer. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? You can still be a really effective coach
Yeah.
using the tools that you have, but recognize, this is the second part, I would say, is that recognize that if I am a quiet coach or a quieter coach, that there is value in being at times overly animated and
Mhm.
overly loud. It's a communication tool
Yeah.
that drives behavior change from players. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like think about
Yeah.
any time like a parent listening, if you raise your voice at your child and they're like, let's stand straight up. You know what I mean? It's the same thing, man. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I never yell at my child, and then you yell at them, right? And then they listen, right?
Right.
So how you communicate with the players, you don't think about it as I'm quiet versus I'm loud, or I use guided questions versus
Mhm.
directives. They're all just tools to get responses from players. So think about how you can use those and just recognize which ones that you need working, I think.
Yeah. I think that's great advice, inside and outside of coach. Like, it's okay to be yourself. Like,
Yeah,
please be who you are. Um, and that's going to be the most effective version. I
definitely.
feel like a lot of coaches try to play like Barcelona, or my team's going to play like Man City. You don't coach like that. That's not who you are. It's not your identity. And it's okay to let your identity kind of bleed over into the teams that you coach.
Yeah.
I think that's really important insight.
Those guys were my inspiration, though, right? I love Barca. I love the
Mhm.
way Pep coaches teams and plays his teams now, but I'm not as intense as Pep when he coaches, man. You know what I mean? I've seen the videos, like, and those are just snippets, right? He could be completely
Yeah.
different, but,
Yeah.
I'm not him, and my team, won't play like him, but I appreciate that style of
Mhm.
play. So in some capacity, I wanted to make that part of the identity that I had with my team, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what that would go into the conversation of me telling the players, like, hey, I'm not going to project this on you. I really would like you guys to do like partial of this or like play like this because you're
Mhm.
capable of doing it. Do you guys even like this style? You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe they don't. Maybe they're like, oh, we want to play long ball, direct 4-4-2 coach or 4 2
Right.
4. You know what I mean? Like we want forwards. So I think that's where it's all part of the conversation. So
Mhm.
I think, yeah, don't think you got to make all the decisions on your own. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So that brings us to the end. Let's share some things from our sponsors. Did I do it? Yeah. So while this is loading, this has been episode 14 of Rain Talks with John Bello from District Sports Consulting. Big shout out to our sponsors, B&G Custom Screen Printing and Embroidery for our gear, for our kits. One Step Beyond Fitness takes care of our mentality, our spirituality, and our overall fitness. D17s is a new grassroots level sponsor, D17 Athletics. Davis Designs takes care of our artwork and our stickers and magnets and all types of goodies. And Leveling the Playing Field, fantastic organization that brings equipment to athletes that need equipment. Thank you, everybody. This was episode 14.